Now to Jonathan Conricus, former spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Forces, now senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, a think tank that takes a hard line on Iran. Good evening to you, Jonathan. Thank you very much for being with us as this situation continues to develop. Of course, we now know both the IDF, Iran have confirmed the launch of drones. What is Israel now anticipating, bracing for?
Well, good evening. Thank you for having me in this quite historic night that we have now in Israel. For the first time, masks are off. Iran is attacking Israel for the first time after decades of attacking Israel indirectly. Iran is attacking Israel directly from its soil for the first time. What Israel is doing isn't only bracing, but actively defending itself, and your correspondent made some remarks about his doubts about Israeli air defenses. I think that they are quite solid, and I know that they are working as we speak. There have been about 100 or so rockets and missiles and drones fired from Iran towards Israel. And I understand that Israeli air defenses are operating in order to shoot them out of the sky as soon as possible, so as to make sure that they don't even reach Israel, Israeli civilians, or the Israeli military. And that is what's going on right now. And then we will see how this, what the actual damage will be. And then that will, of course, determine or have an important influence on how Israel will respond. But I think that at the end of the day here, we're at a historic moment, what could be really the beginning of a new Middle East, where there's an opportunity for Israel to change course and for the US and Sunni states to really shape up the Middle East in a different way and to stand up against Iranian aggression.
We are, just to tell our viewers right now, taking a look at the live pictures of Haifa there in northern Israel right now, just to tell our viewers. But Jonathan, just to come back to you, you were talking about we will have to see what Israel's response and its full response will be. What do you think that could be? I mean, we'll have to wait to see how this fully unfolds, but do you now think that we could see a volley of attacks, counterattacks here?
I think so. Israel has far superior firepower than Iran, definitely when it comes to long range and precision. Israel also has much better air defenses than Iran has. Iran is very, very good at sending proxy organizations to do their fighting for them. And this is what Iran has been doing for the last decades, funding and arming terrorists all across the Middle East in order to fight against Israel, the US, and the West in general. That's how Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and many other Iranian proxies have been allowed to exist. And hopefully the Israeli responses will be forward-looking and looking at how can we create a better and safer Middle East for Israelis, for peace-loving countries in the future, and how can Iran be forced to stop funding terror and to stop providing arms for terror organizations in the Middle East. And there's quite a lot of targets in Iran that I think that Israeli military planners and the Air Force are aware of. All of them, I think, are being planned and assessed as we speak. And again, depending on, of course, cabinet decisions, depending on casualties, depending on the coordination with the US and the American input on things here, this can, of course, become even more complex if Iran also decides to fire at American troops in the Middle East.
Jonathan.
Or perhaps others that are also participating in the fighting here. I know that the Israeli Prime Minister mentioned France and the UK as allies supporting Israel. So we may see involvement in that as well.
Okay.
So many moving parts and quite a complex situation.
And Jonathan, may I just ask you, to what extent do you think that Israel anticipated this when, off the back of what we saw happen in Syria with the attack on the Iranian diplomatic compound there, was Israel then waiting for this counterattack before that, do you think? Had it factored that into that decision?
I assume so, yes. I think that Israel, for the first time, it's actually quite amazing when you think of it. Iran has been attacking Israel indirectly with its proxies for the last half year, Hamas, Hezbollah, and its Syrian proxies and the Houthis. And last week was the first time that Israel struck Iranian targets close to Israel. I think it was a welcome thing to do. It's the right thing to do. Israel cannot continue to live under these horrible conditions whereby Iran is funding and arming terror organizations
we know that attack
around its borders.
Was condemned by the United Nations, saying that essentially diplomatic compounds under international law are off limits under international law.
Yes, well, allow me not to be too impressed with that condemnation. I will wait for condemnation about Iranian proxies attacking Israel and Israeli civilians relentlessly for the last half year, and then I will, be very concerned about what they say about buildings or not buildings. And by the way, to be clear, it was a building next to the Iranian complex, the Iranian diplomatic complex, and not a diplomatic building, if we want to be accurate with the details. But really, I don't think that matters much. The people who were killed in Damascus were Iranian, part of the Iranian military, the Quds Force, and they were busy coordinating, fighting against Israel, arming, equipping, and directing fires against Israel, against Israeli civilians and the military. And therefore, very valid and legal military targets. To be speaking about which building they were in when they were struck, I think is really missing the point. And again, choosing to attack Israel instead of really looking at who the aggressor is here. Iran is the aggressor in the Middle East. They are funding terror, they are arming terror, and now, for the first time, masks are off, and Israel will have the opportunity and every inch of justified action to be able to strike back at Iran after they have, for the first time now, attacked Israel from sovereign Iranian soil.
Jonathan Conricus, former spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Forces, now a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.